Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to HBCU Game Day. I'm Tolly Carr in Atlanta. We have week 2 of college football on deck, and we have some breaking news heading into the weekend. And it is not good news for Alabama State University. Andrew Body is out for the season. Just one game in, he is having season-ending shoulder surgery. And that news was first reported by HBCU legends. Kyle Mosley does a great job there. He got the scoop on the news, breaking news. Alabama State's quarterback Andrew Body is out. Let's welcome in the rest of the crew today. We're going to talk a little football here. We got Chuck, Charles Bishop, special guest, and we have Wilton Jackson. Charles is in 3rd Ward, Houston, Texas, and Wilton, I never know, Wilton. Atlanta, Mississippi. I mean, you are anywhere along I-20. You are the man on the move. Mississippi today.
I am in Mississippi today. Thank God.
Okay. All right. Wilton is in Mississippi today.
I know the feeling well, Wilton. I know the feeling
well. Guys, I just hate to see it. Hate to start off the show. I hate to even have to report it, but it is what it is. For the second time in his young career, the dynamic Andrew Body is going to miss pretty much all of the college football season minus one game. Chuck, since you're right beside me in this 3-box here, I'll start right there with you. What were your thoughts when you heard the news?
You're heartbroken for Andrew. I mean, when you take a look at his dynamic play on display against North Carolina Central, rushed for over 130 yards in that game, and you just thought about, this is what the SWAC will be having to deal with this upcoming season. Absolutely heartbroken, especially in a year where there's a lot of parity, I think, in the SWAC and SWAC East especially. To lose a chess piece like this is pretty major.
All right, Wilton, this news just broke on Wednesday night. It was close to midnight. It might have been early Thursday morning when Kyle broke that news online. Your thoughts, Wilton, when you heard season over for Andrew Body?
I got nervous for Alabama State in general, but even like Charles said, basically, when you think about Andrew Body and where he's coming from Texas Southern, this was supposed to be the year that he was supposed to take that next leap and also prepare Alabama State into a major contender, potentially, competing for a SWAC championship. And now that he's out, of course, there's John O'Brien, the backup quarterback to him. But what we saw from the game on Saturday, that's a situation where we know from that situation who the starting quarterback was supposed to be. And now that Andrew Body is going to be out, now you have John O'Brien stepping in, and it's just like you hate it for Andrew Body, but it's a situation where this is where we're at now.
Chuck, as dynamic as his running was, and it was electric, it's fun to watch. It's probably not a lot of fun if you're an opposing defense. But at the same time, I don't know about you guys, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, how sustainable is this over the course of a college football season?
I think that was what was going through my mind as you were watching him run, especially with the health history. Could he sustain it during the course of the season? And like I said, it's tough to watch because of all the intangibles that he brought to that game. It was as though he was seemingly trying to will Alabama State to win that football game, especially on that final drive where he did go out. It's tough to watch. It's tough because Andrew's a good kid. Got an opportunity to see him up close here at Texas Southern. But I tell you what, it changes the dynamic of the SWAC race, I think now. I think if you're a Jackson State fan or a FAMU fan, you circle October 19th and you put another circle around it now when FAMU heads to Jackson State, because I think the path to the SWAC championship definitely hinges on that game, man.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So we lost the Orange Blossom Classic matchup of Jackson State and FAMU, and so we tell ourselves, well, the division is not going to be decided between these two teams, maybe. And here we are right now saying, look, they're right behind me. I didn't even plan that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Come on, take me full screen. There you go. We got FAMU. We got Jackson State. Collision course. Let me just get out of the way. Let them collide is what it might come down to. That was pretty neat. Didn't even plan that. But guys, when the injury happened, here's why you can't play doctor when you're on the air or, as a fan. I thought Body hurt his hand. Like when he came to the sidelines, I thought somebody stepped on his hand. And then when we were, had the conference call earlier this week with Eddie Robinson Jr., Alabama State's head coach, on Tuesday, because of the holiday, he had not seen the doctor yet. And that's what we were told, at least. And up until last night, I was thinking, man, maybe his hand is, I had no idea. Now it makes sense. He couldn't keep his shoulder there. That's why he was using his hand to support his arm, I would guess. But I was shocked not only that it was season ending, I was shocked that it was actually as severe of an injury as it turned out to be, because it didn't come across that way. At least I didn't think that way watching it on television.
When he stepped off the field, he was clearly holding his hand. I'm sure we all thought, well, maybe it's something in his hand, maybe a broke hand, a sprained hand or something like that. But I never in a million years thought it was going to be a shoulder injury. And when you think about that shoulder injury, the first thing that came to my mind was he's seen this before. We've seen this whole story before. And this is an Alabama State team that was really, really at least fans were looking forward to him being the missing piece for Alabama State to potentially compete for a SWAC title. And so now, it's just it's heartbreaking for him.
Yeah, he was the missing piece for Texas Southern last year, going into the season. Wherever Body goes, people think he's gonna change the game. He just has not had that opportunity now for 2 seasons in a row. So, guys, they have Miles coming up, a Division II opponent from the SIAC. You might think to yourself, that's the good news. Well, not so much. Miles has proven that they can beat Alabama State, that they can play close to Alabama State. Alabama State has had a headache with Miles the past few seasons. At this point, Chuck, if Miles wins, does it classify as an upset?
No, sir. No, sir. This Miles team, the Sam Shade team, they bring the physicality. They check that off. They are very much, I tell you, from looking at them up close, they kind of remind you of a Miakish team, the way they can really punch you in the mouth and things of that nature. And we saw that last year. We saw them knock off Alabama State. So I think there is concern that how will this team rally around Jonah O'Brien going forward. And like I said, it takes a significant chess piece off the board for Alabama State. They might have to look at, relying on that defense to kind of carry them, much like last year where the defense was kind of the star of the show.
All right, Wilton, I know you are ready to break down this game from stats and keys of the game, and I'm just going to pull your cord and let you go here, Wilton. But the one thing that I'm looking at is the offensive line still working on coming together for Alabama State. A bit of a shaky performance against North Carolina Central. And the times that I saw Jonah O'Brien run Wilton, no shade. He looked about as fast as I am, and I'm an old, slow 50-year-old man. Now, Jonah O'Brien can beat me in a foot race, I'm sure, no doubt about it, but him running did not look like that part of his game is going to cut it in the SWAC.
Well, Tyler, I can assure you he's no Michael Vick. He's not running a 4.3 and a 40-yard dash, and he may beat you, but he might not beat you that much when it comes to running. But I'll say this. Their offensive line is shaky, which leads me to think that Miles really could potentially win this game against them. And to Charles' point, it won't necessarily be an upset. But when I look at that, if Miles does get this win, it'll be because, for one, they got after O'Brien, and they made him basically run for his life in some ways, because we saw what he did when he passed the ball. He didn't pass that much. He didn't look that strong, mainly due to the fact of the offensive line. And so when you think about that, defense is going to be key for Miles, but then also the play from Cameron Ivory at quarterback. One of his favorite weapons is Jaya Andrews. If he can get going pretty quickly, I think that could bode well for them. And then also establishing the run. Now, granted, Alabama State has a pretty stout defense also that Charles mentioned. So in terms of if they can get the running game going against Alabama State, I think that would be strong for them. And then also taking advantage of any scoring opportunities they get.
All right. It's going to be one to watch this weekend. Miles looking to check off the resume of beating a SWAC team once again. But they also say, guys, the biggest improvement in any college team from year to year is from game 1 to game 2. Let's shine a positive light for Alabama State. Let's not make it all doom and gloom. At least at this point, you can say they know who their quarterback is. Like, they're going to have to ride and die with Jonah O'Brien because we're definitely not going to do is it Andrew, is it Jonah? And I think Chuck having one voice, and look, you got to make the plays, you got to do that part, but at least knowing this is my guy every time I go out on the field, unless, something else happens injury-wise, this is how the snap count is going to be. These are his strengths. These are his weaknesses. I don't have to adjust on the fly throughout the game. Are you buying that as a positive, Chuck?
I will take that as a positive. I think that's huge. I mean, going forward, and like I said, it's about this team now rallying around Jonah O'Brien and doing their 1/11th, if you will, each individually to try to make sure that this Alabama State offense stays on the go. I mean, I'm looking to see more Marcus Harris. I mean, I think his carrying the ball is going to be huge for giving this offensive attack some balance, because when we take a look at the two quarterbacks, Jonah O'Brien was the thrower of the two. So it just changes the dynamics of how this Alabama State offense goes going forward. So I'm really curious, and I think this is a great litmus test in terms of taking on this Miles team that, of course, knocked Alabama State off last year.
Wilton, can I sell you on that enthusiasm? Can I sell you on that positive for those Hornets of ASU?
You can. I mean, and at the end of the day, Tyler, the games are still played on the field. We could talk about stats. We could talk about what happened last week. The good thing about last week, it was last week. There's nothing else you can do about it. And so they have a game to potentially win on Saturday, and they can still potentially win that. And one other person I want to add to who Charles mentioned was Daquan Kinsey, the CAU running back that transferred into Alabama State. They can get him going pretty good, too, in the rushing tech. I think it bodes well for them, too. The running the ball clearly is going to help Alabama State get a win.
Very much so.
Daquan might look back at CAU and be like, oh, well, wait, y'all didn't tell me all that. You didn't tell me exactly what I was leaving. I know when I left, but you didn't tell me what was coming in. All right, let's talk about South Carolina State, the Citadel, or the Citadel, depending on which side of the Mississippi you are on. South Carolina State, to me, looked very impressive, had FAMU on the ropes in the fourth quarter. On the road, there was a lot of excitement about Chennis Berry coming over from Benedict, where he took that team to SIAC championships, into the playoffs, had everyone excited. That excitement now at South Carolina State as he takes over the reins from Buddy Pugh, the legend who retired last year. Although South Carolina State did not get the win last weekend, impressive moral victories don't really count for the standings. But for sports media, we can be impressed. Chuck, your level of being impressed by the debut of Chennis Berry and that close one against FAMU?
I'm very impressed by South Carolina State, and that Chennis Berry enthusiasm, it has translated from Benedict over to South Carolina State. They had the defending Black College national champions on the rope. It's a testament for A&M that they were able to fight their way back in and get the win. But I tell you what, I'm very bullish on South Carolina State going forward because you saw that South Carolina State physicality in that game. They really, really took it to FAMU. Wasn't able to hold on for the victory, but you've got to be excited if you're a South Carolina State Bulldog fan.
Wilton, they like to talk about the mailman, delivering the mail. Can South Carolina State deliver that mail to the Citadel this weekend?
Absolutely, they can. They did it last year in Buddy Pugh's last season with the program. And I honestly, based off what I'm seeing from South Carolina State this year and how they pretty much were very physical with FAMU, I don't expect anything less against the Citadel. So when I look at this team, as long as they reduce the penalties that they have and they convert on third downs, they struggle to convert on third downs against FAMU. And obviously, any good football team, you have to be able to convert on third downs to continue to move the ball. So as long as they do that and also find a way to get Eric Phoenix more consistent in the offense, in addition to explosive rushing attack, I think they'll be okay. You're talking about a team in South Carolina State that had over 500 yards of offense against the Citadel last year. So I don't see where they may not have 500 yards of offense this time around, but I don't see where they won't be able to move the ball and or stop the Citadel when they need to.
Now, the Citadel, Wilton, very impressive in the red zone. They get the ball inside the 20 on the ground. Just going off 1 week of data, they have a 75% scoring rate there.
You're right, and so that goes to my point of if you're South Carolina State, if you allow the Citadel to get in the red zone, if you've allowed them to move the ball down the field on you, that means in the red zone you have to tighten your defense up. So in most cases, if not all cases, you want to limit the Citadel to field goals. And this is a team that most people may not know about. This is a team that's led by Maurice Drayton. They didn't win a game last year. And they won one game already when they defeated Charleston Southern last week. So this is a team that's coming into this game knowing that they lost to South Carolina State last year, trying to get their revenge.
All right. Also this weekend, more East Coast bias for you, Chuck. I know you love it. We have Elon and North Carolina Central. North Carolina Central won this game against Elon last year. Chuck, you saw the game on Saturday, got up big on Alabama State, allowed a little comeback, but then they were able to finish the deal. Your thoughts on North Carolina Central, a team just 1 year removed away from winning the Celebration Bowl? Chuck, who did they beat? Chuck, who did?
Of course. Thank you, Tolly. Very impressive outing for North Carolina Central, especially Jamari Taylor. When you take a look at what he was able to do, 128 yards in that game. But I mean, I love Trey Oliver out of conference. I mean, they don't take a step back whatsoever. You know that team is always going to be not just over prep for whatever Elon brings to the table. And like you said, they knocked them off last year. And you just like the way North Carolina Central, they're physical at the point of attack. That's what they do. They pound you. And Walker Harris, although you have to take a look at the elements in that game. I think he proved himself to be a capable signal caller. And you would have confidence in terms of Walker Harris being under center for North Carolina Central in this game. I do look for them to get the W.
Wilton, I'm a North Carolina native. No one in North Carolina considers Elon a football powerhouse. But on paper, let's just talk about the reality, fellas. I'm amongst friends here. HBCU, all things being equal, defeats a PWI. It's a win with a little gravy on top, right? Because people, even if they don't know what's going on, they're just like, well, yeah, that school's probably going to win. So it can be a feather in your cap amongst the fan base, if nothing else. But Wilton and Chuck, I'm going to come back to this on you with South Carolina State. The good thing and the bad thing here is when you're in the MEAC, Wilton, you can have a great out-of-conference schedule. You can have a bad out-of-conference schedule. It really doesn't matter.
Yep. No, you can. You couldn't have said it any better. Just ask North Carolina Central when they got to the end of the season and they weren't in the Celebration Bowl. It was Howard. But, we won't even rehash that because we all thought North Carolina Central would have been in the Celebration Bowl. But this is a game that's still important to them. This is a team in Elon that they beat last year. And a lot of people will put emphasis on Davius Richards and his impact that he had in this game. But I'm interested to see how Walker Harris takes this game. Because now this is his time, this is his team, and what that looks like going forward, a lot of it will depend on him. Of course, Jamari Taylor, who Charles just mentioned, has a heavy impact on that team. But we have to see what Walker Harris is going to do. And he's going to go up against another good defense. You're talking about a couple linebackers from Elon and Brandon Tyson and Marco Patinero. And then they also had the CAA's preseason Defensive Player of the Year and safety Caleb Curtin. So he's going to see another great defense this week, and it's going to be another test for Trey Oliver and his team to see just how well they're going to continue to play against outside FCS teams.
And, Chuck, this is what I wanted to circle back to you with for South Carolina State and Chennis Berry. I think this is a great opportunity to just, look, it's his first year there on campus at South Carolina State. You're getting all the moving parts working. For the MEAC, it's almost like, and I know these coaches will get mad at me, it's almost like a preseason kind of sort of, because you just got to win the MEAC, get to the Celebration Bowl, you get the money, you get the fame, you get to be the HBCU national champion, you get to play for all that, and there's nothing that you do out of conference that gets in the way of that.
Nothing that you do out of conference gets in the way of that, and you get an opportunity to put more good tidings out there on the field around Chennis Berry. And, you can't underscore the regionality of South Carolina State playing Citadel, what it does for, trying to recruit South Carolina, North Carolina. These games are important with regards to, these FCS versus FCS, out-of-conference FCS matchups to where you might can get a lineman, you might get a linebacker somewhere that, takes more of a focused look at the South Carolina State program.
All right, more East Coast bias here. Virginia State, Norfolk State, formerly the Labor Day Classic. Now we're just, kind of a week after Labor Day. Still a big game, a chance for a CIAA school in Virginia State. And they got that whole big state, little state thing. I'm a CIAA guy, but I'm from the CIAA South, right? I'm Winston-Salem State, but there's that whole thing between Virginia State and Norfolk State, and it's fun to watch from afar, even when you don't have a dog in the fight. Chuck, you're very familiar with Dawson Odoms, of course, all of his time from Southern. Where do you feel like he sits right now with the Norfolk State faithful? Do you feel like they are looking for some wins there? He hasn't been there a long time, but he's been there for a little minute now.
I think Dawson Odom's time there at Norfolk State, this is a pivotal game. When you take a look at a Virginia State team and you mentioned it with this a big versus small thing, these CIAA teams, they don't take a step back. I mean, even with Winston-Salem State, you're going to look for a good outing against North Carolina A&T.
You damn right we are, Chuck. You are absolutely right, Chuck. Looking for the win, baby.
But I think this is a pivotal game. I think if you're Dawson Odoms, you're trying to tread water until you can get back to Otto Kuhn. And I think this is going to be a huge game for Norfolk State in terms of getting their passing game, I think, a little bit more on track. We didn't get to see too much of it against FAMU, but they can run the football. They come downhill fast, and they've got to put that MEAC stamp on Virginia State this upcoming weekend.
Got to put that thing on them, Chuck says. Wilton, break it down for us. Keys to the game, Virginia State, Norfolk State.
When I think of this, I think of course, Dawson Odoms, but then I think of Dr. Henry Frazier and what he's been able to do with Virginia State. And you talk about this Virginia State team just came off a win against Benedict, who won the SIC last year, so that's something to note. But I think when it comes to Virginia State attempted to win this game, they have to limit Jalen Daniels' playmaking ability and also stop the Spartans' rushing attack. I mean, I was at that game when they played FAMU, and they absolutely ran right down the middle of FAMU's defense in that first half and a little bit of the third quarter. So them being able to stop Kevin King, Zavion Evans, Jalen Parham, that's going to be key for them. And then also having success from their quarterback, Romello Williams, and then also their running backs, Jamil Williams. For those who may not know him, you should get to know him. He's a pretty powerful running back. Last week he had 8 carries for 150 yards and 2 scores. So that's somebody that I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in this game. And then also when you're Norfolk State, it's simple for them. Like Charles said, you got to see more of Daniels throwing the ball because we didn't see much of that against FAMU. And then do what you do best. When we sat in the press conference and listened to Dawson Odoms in that press conference, he said, we have a good football team. We know that we can run the football against anybody. Well, this is the time that we need to see it.
All right, so Norfolk State is sitting at 0-2. They lost the MEAC SWAC Challenge to FAMU. And then last week it was just time to get paid, East Carolina. Wilton, it might be the rushing game, but tell me just one thing for you, maybe the top thing that people might be overlooking about Norfolk State just because they, look. I was about to date myself and say they look at the paper. No one looks at the paper anymore, but you look at the standings and you see 0-2 and you just think, oh yeah, those guys they're not hitting on much. But what is it that you like about this team the most, despite the winless record so far?
I think that people are going to just most people are just going to look at the 0-2 record and say, hey, here it is, same old Norfolk State, same old team that we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years, and Dawson Odoms is not changing anything. He had the rough play call, but I think that people really need to pay attention to how well their offensive line played against FAMU, and don't forget that. Because obviously, as we have all said in the beginning of the show, the adjustments made from week 1 to week 2 is some of the greatest adjustments that you'll see. Well, I think that with the way that this team is constructed as it continues to go, and of course once Otto Kuhn comes back, I think this is still a Norfolk State team that can make some noise. I would never say that they will win the MEAC this year, but I will say that there will be more consistency, I think, as he gets back, and as long as they can continue to run the ball, I think people need to give them that credit, and they'll be able to see just how good this team could be.
Chuck, you remain bullish in this matchup for Norfolk State.
For Norfolk State, I would love to see some balance. I know they can run the football, and as Wilton said, I know the offensive line, they can beat you up, and if it works, continue with it. But if I'm a fan of the Spartans, if I get balance, it makes me feel better as I go through the season, knowing that this team can do one thing, but they can also hurt you passing the football, and especially when you get in those sort of in between sort of numbers, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, where running might not be advantageous. You want to be able to know that you can still keep the chains moving, picking up the first down.
All right, some other games to watch this weekend. A pretty iconic matchup of brands when it comes to Tuskegee and Grambling. I mean, the fighting Lionel Richies. There's so many things that Tuskegee is known for. Just having a little fun there because I love Lionel Richie. Anytime I can bring his name up, it's a cool deal. But look, the T versus the G. They literally both just have the single letter there as the brand representation because of what they stand for. On the football field, Chuck, what are you expecting when the T of Tuskegee and the G of Grambling get together?
It was surprising last week that Tuskegee took the L. I was not expecting to see them start out on the wrong end of the ledger. I think for Grambling, especially this being a home game, you need to open things up and really bring in the Mickey Joseph era in right there at exit 82, because everybody, Gremlin's sort of a dark horse that everybody's kind of looking at in the SWAC, especially when you take a look at how wide open the SWAC West has the potential to be. And Miles Crowley really needs to crank things up in this game and really show everybody why he's a preseason SWAC offensive player of the year.
All right, Wilton, T and G in the hole this weekend. What do you see?
I think this is a more important game for Grambling than it is for Tuskegee. And to essentially Charles' point, this is a Grambling team that everybody, kind of like with Southern fans and Jackson State fans, when you're fans of these programs and you know these historic programs, you expect to win. And no one expects a program to win more than Grambling, right? I mean, we know the history behind Grambling football, the university, all of that. So I think this game is more important for Grambling, and I think that it all begins and ends with Miles Crowley and what he's able to do. They had some missed opportunities last week. I know the final score wasn't necessarily as indicative of what that game really was, but I think that if they would have been able to capitalize on some opportunities, it would have been a little bit closer. But them capitalizing on some opportunities this week and seeing more proficient play from Miles Crowley, especially just more production in general, I think it will bode well for Grambling in this game. They need this game more than Tuskegee does.
All right, a bonus look. Southern, Savannah State. I would say, Southern is going to win this game. If I were betting, I don't bet, but if I were, I would go with Southern. But what did you guys think of the coaching? We're going to call it the debut, although Terrence Graves has coached both Grambling and Southern in an interim role, but now as the full-time official head coach of Southern. How did they, even though they didn't get the win, how did you think those guys looked against McNeese?
I think, Wilton kind of touched on it. I mean, when you are part of these fan bases, whether you're talking Southern, Grambling, or Jackson State, the expectations are always outside. So there's a perception when you have a team coming in that's a lower division that you need to put some points up. So I think, it kind of plays in this weekend with Southern, whether they can, put some points up against a perceived team that's not on your level, that you can put 25, 30 some odd points up, and that your defense looks good, that they're able to shut out Savannah State to a point to where you really feel good going into guess who's next week. Jackson State and Southern. So you want to have some good feelings about going to Jackson next week.
That's too early for the boombox. I need some brown leaves on the ground. I need the air to be a little crisper before we get to the boombox, but it is what it is. When you have those two games you can schedule conference opponents out of conference, it just is what it is. You're going to make that money wherever you can. Wilton, another game we're looking at, Jackson State and Lane. Chuck told us at the beginning of the show, no matter what you think, it's still coming back to Jackson State and FAMU. When you look at the SWAC East there. So Jackson State is going to take on a SIAC. A lot of SWAC SIAC action going on this weekend. What are you expecting from the Tigers there, Wilton?
I'm expecting the running game to be strong, actually really strong. This is a team that TC, when he talked about it in his press conference this week, he's not taking Lane for granted. He's playing against one of his former players. That Byron Brown is the coach at Lane, but he played at Grambling, but they played together. They played against each other when he was in his playing days at Jackson State. And so essentially, I'm looking for Jackson State to hone in on the running game, which has been well for them. Offensive line looked good up until a couple points last week in the second half against Louisiana Monroe, where they weren't able to convert in times that they needed. But I'm looking for the running game to be strong. I'm also looking to see what Jacoby and Morgan or if Cam McCoy gets some playing time, what that's going to look like. Like I said, Jacoby and Morgan, when I think about him, I think about that first drive after halftime that Jackson State, they were down 17-7, get that touchdown. That game was 17-14. That was a really, really, really strong drive by Jackson State. Obviously, every drive is not going to be like that, but if they can get most drives as consistent as that one, moving the ball proficiently and consistently, I think it bodes well for them. But I think that this is a game that Jackson State wins at home. I also think that, this is a game they need to win at home, because Coach Taylor also talked about the fact that when they had home games last year, that they didn't always play their best ball. And so he's really, honing in with players on making sure that they take the field on Saturday with a lot of energy and confidence.
Chuck, I would imagine you have an opinion or five about Jackson State football.
You know what, Tolly? Just maybe a couple. But I would love to see Jacoby and Morgan throw the ball downfield a little bit more than he did in the UL Monroe game. I think, to Wilton's point, I think Jackson State, they can run the football. We saw their physicality on display against the FBS football team. So to see that physicality, being able to run the football, and trust me, I don't think they're sleeping on Lane. Everybody knows Lane knocked off Tennessee State in 2022. So this is a game that Jackson State needs to look good, especially, like I said, people want to have, something good feeling about themselves going into that game next week. I don't want to mention it again, but it's Jackson State and Southern next week. So you want the pieces to start coming together.
You don't want to look too far ahead. You don't want to look over Lane. You don't want to look through Lane, but you have an awareness. You have an awareness of what's coming in September.
Very much so. Very much so.
Is that Jackson State? Is that at JSU or is that at Southern?
It is at Jackson State.
At Jackson.
It is at Jackson,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And it's a night game.
Well, I think we learned our lessons about afternoon games in September at Jackson State. Just think back to Jackson State and Grambling about 2 years ago. It was a little toasty out there. A little toasty.
A little bit, yeah.
Little toasty. So hats off, salute to making those games at night early in the season. That is the thing to do for sure. All right, guys. Well, it's a big weekend. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here at HBCU. I just literally called Charles. I was like, can you join us? He was like, give me 10 minutes and I am there. Wilton is here every week. I'm actually filling in for Simone Stanley, who is booked and busy, so she is on the road. It's going to be an exciting weekend, but again, the big news heading into week 2, Andrew Body out for the rest of the year. Shoulder surgery at Alabama State wasn't the news anyone wanted to hear. We wanted to see that dynamic play on the field, but for the second year in a row, his season is cut short, so we do wish him all the best in his recovery. From Atlanta to Houston to Jackson, Mississippi. Baby, we sound like Silk Sonic. We're all over the place. Bruno Mars in the house. All right. I'm Tolly Carr. Those are my boys. We'll see you guys next time.